Hey guys, good afternoon. How you doing? This is Mike McCormick with Advanced Criminology here in Owings Mills, and I'm here today to do a assessment of a couple of things dealing with two organizations that represent police officers in the Baltimore City Police Department. And we'll talk about those two organizations and their lack of response to the recent murder of Detective Sean Suter. I want to make note that today is 12/8/2017. It's 3:12 p.m. roughly, Eastern Standard Time. The reason I gave out a time today is because what I'm about to talk about deals with both of these organizations and their representation of officers within that department. And so I'll give them the opportunity to respond back to Advanced Criminology once I report what I want to report on dealing with both of those agencies within the organizations within the department that officers rely on for representation and other issues. So let's start with the FOP, Lodge Number 3 in Baltimore, and I'll just highlight what that particular lodge is responsible for. They are responsible for officers' rights, and they have been in that position for some decades now within the department. Even when I was on the department, I chose to join the FOP. I later joined the Vanguard Justice Society, which is the other organization. And typically the Vanguard Justice Society represents, or advocates, I won't say so much representation, but they advocate on behalf of black officers in the police department in terms of discriminatory issues, maybe some promotional issues. That's kind of how they got their start. You know, back in the 70s, that black police officers weren't being promoted. There were other discriminatory issues taking place within the department, and gave rise to a couple of officers starting that organization. They also collect dues as well as the FOP. The FOP is a more powerful organization than the Vanguard Justice Society, and that's probably why majority of those officers in the police department, as well as police departments around the country, join the FOP, because of just how strong of a political organization they are. And when I say political organization, not only are they a strong political organization, they're a special interest group as well. So some of the things that the FOP is charged with in that organization is that they advocate for labor contracts, labor disputes, collective bargaining for officers. They also deal with providing representation for officers who are charged with misconduct within the department, as well as officers who may be charged with some criminal penalties. Excuse me, some criminal acts in the department. Oftentimes, they will be represented, or their officers might have to find their own representation. And both organizations charge a dues for that representation. Now, mind you, most officers will join the FOP because of their reputation historically with getting officers in a better position in terms of bargaining for better working hours, conditions, and things like that, as well as pay. So the majority of the officers are going to be members of that organization. But one of the things that we talk about, and they also deal with retirement and pension, because you also have pension issues with officers as well. So they also advocate on that behalf too. One of the things that I wanted to talk about was, since Detective Sean Suter's murder, which has been, as of today, this is day 24. If you didn't know, if you weren't keeping up, we're going to keep up. So it's day 24 of his murder, and we have yet to have anybody in custody for killing the detective. So we decided to take a look just how important are these organizations, and what I found alarming and somewhat I was just concerned is I had an opportunity to go on both websites, and I encourage you to do the same thing. And for the life of me, I didn't see anything from from November 15th, when the officer was murdered, to this date, indicating anything about the officer's death. Typically what you would see in a website, when the officer dying and under the conditions that the officer died under, there was no mention of the shooting, the investigation, no mention of the funeral, the viewing, none of that. No mention about the officer's family or background, his background whether private or a professional. None of that was ever mentioned. We only learned about these things about Officer Detective Suter through the media. We didn't learn about it through the websites that these two organizations have online. So I was just a little alarmed about that. Now, if you kind of start tabbing around in both organizations, you'll find there is one line mentioned on the FOP website, but it mentions all of the other officers who have died in the line of duty on the FOP's website. But you got to kind of tab 3 or 4 places before you get there. We'll give credit to the Vanguard Justice Society because on their homepage they actually have a section there that talks about the different black officers who have expired in the line of duty. They probably just haven't got to mentioning Detective Suter or putting a picture online yet. But they still should have been a little bit more conscious, both organizations should have been a little bit more conscious to post that information for not only police officers but for the general public to go to learn a little bit more about the officer. So I found that interesting. What I also found interesting is that you have two organizations, the FOP being the most powerful organization who collects dues from officers, and they've collected over millions of dollars in the past since their inception. The Vanguard Justice Society, I don't know how much money they've collected over the years, but it's thousands of dollars from dues as well. So I find it interesting that when there was a $215,000 offer reward for any information leading to an arrest of the murder suspect in Officer Suter's case, what I didn't see any acknowledgement by either organization wanting to donate money for the reward. And yet they take thousands, if not have taken millions of dollars over the years, and there was no mention of it. Now, if it was, feel free to contact me, Advanced Criminology, and I'll retract what I'm talking about now. But I don't see anything as I comb through the both websites, as I comb through media reports. There's no made mention of these two organizations giving any money at all towards the reward. So I found that interesting. I just didn't make too much sense to me that you would have outside agencies giving to the police department for a reward, but yet the very agency that Detective Suter worked for, and the very organization that he joined, failed to do anything on his behalf in terms of reward. And I just again perplexing for me. So, but what I found interesting is I went on the website, FOP's website, and I learned a few things. I learned that they have some funds that they try to raise, and one's called the Distress Fund, the History Fund. But the Distress Fund, and this Distress Fund is supposed to be to pay medical bills for officers and other bills they may have. And what I found is that to date, they had a goal of $50,000, and yet they only raised $60. And this particular fund has 175 days left to go. So I'm just wondering, what is it where these officers can't raise money for their own officers? As much money as they take in. And I'm just trying to figure out why is there a disconnect between the organization and the membership in terms of support, because that's what it seems like. And essentially what it is this, in my mind, is that I personally wouldn't have joined the FOP had it not been for the legal aspect of the FOP. And I'll tell you why. Because number one, if I get in trouble for whatever reason, misconduct or whatever, I do have the option of having free representation from their legal department. In terms of collective bargaining, whether I join the FOP or not would not matter. That's not going to affect me one way or the other, whether I'm a member or non-member. So essentially, you'll find that most officers who join the FOP join strictly for legal representation, because everything else is a given. So that's just, you know, from my perspective, from what I saw, and looking at what they provide in terms of benefits for being a member. Let's see. So, having said that, I just thought it was interesting. Again, I'll repeat that they would have a fund that assists officers in distress, whether it's medical bills they have to pay, and yet to date they only raised $60 when they wanted to raise $50,000. So I thought that was interesting. So here we are today, day 24, and there has been no closeness to solving this particular crime. We have seen homicide detectives working on other cases in the city where they've come and solved them quite fast. You know, one was solved within 24 hours. A couple of them been solved within 48 hours. This is a different kind of animal. And this is a different kind of animal, and I'll give you the reasoning, because what I like to do on this particular channel is because I have my members who also respond. And that's why I tell you, if you want to respond to the video in the comment section. And lots of times I'll use some of your comments just to put out there through the wider audience who might be thinking about the same thing. So really what we have in day 24 in terms of everybody's suspicion that wants to know, you know, what's going on and why and how the officer was killed. They're basically, I think you all agree with me, they're basically three scenarios. The first scenario is that either the officer was killed by a suspect and a random perpetrator where there was no conspiracy involved, okay? Then, or the officer was killed by a perpetrator where that perpetrator was paid to kill the officer through a conspiracy, through the gun squad and maybe other people on the department. That's the other conspiracy theory that's out there that my members talk about. I would say that on this channel, probably 94 to 96% of the folks who comment back to me talk about a conspiracy. They don't see it as a random perpetrator in this particular case. And last but not least, the last thing that's been thrown out there that I've heard, and certainly until we get more physical information, particularly from the medical examiner's report, which they've already ruled it as a homicide by a gunshot wound, okay, to the head. But the last and final, not conspiracy, but the last and final thing we've heard was that the officer killed himself. Now I will tell you, having been down to the scene, having learned more about the officer's background, having basically kind of listened to what evidence that there is and the medical reports, the things that have gone on so far in the case, that's not even 1% of my belief in terms of the officer killing himself. And I don't think it does justice to his family to hear some crap like that at this point, because there's no evidence that he did. So I'm going to leave it as such. And I think the police department needs to focus on the internal environment or focus on the external environment of that organization to let's come to some type of conclusion. Let's come to some type of consensus here at this point at day 24 as to which direction the police department is going to go in trying to solve this case. Now, I understand that the commissioner's requested. I talked about it on my last video about 5 days ago. We put a video on in reference to that the commissioner's requested the FBI's assistance, and rightly so, under the circumstances given. What else do I want to talk about? Okay, so I'm gonna leave it at that. I wanted to keep this one short. I'll be back on in the next week, because what I want to talk about next week is that some folks might find it hard to believe, and that officers can't be overpowered and their revolvers or handguns taken from them and them being murdered by those people who overpowered them. And I will discuss with you in my next video that within the Baltimore Police Department, over the past 100 years of research, or let's just say their existence, we've come up with 10 different, not scenarios, but 10 different officers who were murdered in the line of duty where their handguns were actually taken from them and they were murdered. So it does happen, and we're only looking at the numbers from the Baltimore Police Department. We're not looking at the national numbers where this goes on in every other department. Now, mind you, for folks who don't know, there's 18,000 police departments out there. Believe it or not, 18,000. But generally, when we look at the stats, we'll look at the bigger departments. So we'll probably look at somewhere between 20 to 30 departments and look at what their numbers would be of officers who are disarmed and their handguns are subsequently used to kill them. And we'll take a look at that. I want to thank you for being a part of what we're trying to do here at Advanced Criminology. Keep your comments coming. Also subscribe, and we'll see you next time.